Let's continue with our work, and we have our today's decided to call it keynote speech because we attributed more time to it, and this is because it is from a leading practitioner in the field. It is Dr. Christoph Beier, who is managing director of the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, also known as GITZ, right? And GIZ, or how do you say it properly? You can check up what this organization means, but basically I think the volume of traffic in terms of development cooperation is kind of unimaginably big and unprecedented, especially from small countries' point of view, and therefore we thought that you have experienced things that maybe, who knows, one day we will experience more in our country's development cooperation, and therefore we thought that your experiences in this regard would be particularly useful. And later on, the discussion and the Estonian, so to speak, panel will be chaired by my fellow board member in the Estonian Foreign Policy Institute, Professor Andres Kasekamp, so he will be our next anchorman in this business. Dr. Beier, the floor is yours.
Gentlemen, I'm really very happy to be with you here. It's a privilege and it's an honor to speak to you in this very impressive environment of the Estonian Academy of Science. And in this very beautiful city of Tallinn, it's for me also the first time, like for Mr. Meyer, to be here in Tallinn. And I have to tell you, I had a little bit of time yesterday to look around, and I'm very impressed about the development of Tallinn. And for me, the Tallinn is a very good example for a success story in development. So to enter in my discussion, I would like to tell you, don't restrict your involvement in international cooperation to sending money to the European Commission or to multinational institutions. Bring in your practical experience of your own development in Estonia. Bring it into development cooperation. It is very valuable and it's very needed, and it is very important for us. And we had this in the panel before as well. So when I now start with my presentation, it was said already, it's becoming a little bit less academic and a little bit less political, as I will tell you a little bit about more the practical side of cooperation, of development cooperation. And believe me, when we talk about a practical side in development cooperation, and we focus on how do we implement practically, then this is already a reflection of what we have learned. Because it's at least my personal opinion is, yes, politics is very important. But a lot of our partners are already very good in writing policies, and writing documents. Very good, perfect. They've all studied in Harvard and somewhere, and they are perfect in writing strategic papers, policies, and you name it. The biggest problem is how to translate this in practical development, how to implement what you would like to implement in your countries. And that's why, at least in the German development cooperation, we focus very much for example, with our organization, but also with others, on the aspect of how to support partners in the implementation of very clever and intelligent and sophisticated policies. So this will be a focus as well when I'm explaining a little bit our background, and I will also give you a little bit of a hint and an explanation about the institutional setting, the instruments of German development cooperation. And by doing so, I do not have a complete evaluation of 40, 50, 60 years of development cooperation with me now, but in explaining you how are our institutions looking like, And how do we work? Of course, there's a lot of experiences reflected in what we are doing at the moment. So this is maybe not yet the future, but it is so far we are. And then at the end, I will tell you something about future issues as well. One word regarding the last panel before I start. I'm very thankful to Mr. Meyer as well for the overview, because I'm very much in line what he has said. This is very much also our experience, what we are believing in. And except, of course, of one thesis number 7, where, as you can imagine, this is due to our different backgrounds. And I think in this respect, at least, an analytical thinker like Karl Marx was right. Das Sein bestimmt das Bewusstsein. So what you are, what you're doing, is very much influencing what you are thinking. And I think this is very right. So be aware that now it's one perspective of Germany. I'm very happy that there is a perspective from Germany. It's not the German perspective. It's just my personal perspective being the representative of one institution which is active in development cooperation in Germany. There are many others I will show you, and please don't take this for the German position and perspective. Okay, let's maybe start. Would you push the button? Or shall I do this here? I can do this? Okay. Oh, very good. But I can do this from here. Okay. So, yeah, what do I would like to tell, to share with you? First, I would like to tell you where the GIZ, the German Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, where it is located in the institutional landscape of German international cooperation. Secondly, I would like to tell you a little bit of how do we work, and how is what we have learned reflected in the way we are cooperating and the way we are working. And at the end, I would like to take up some critical questions which we do not, we have not answered by ourselves. These are challenges for us as well, and we are not ready to give the right answers. That's why we feel also that this is a very good initiative to discuss about those issues, also with partners like you. We are very happy. We are always very open and interested to get your voices and your ideas in those issues as well. And if you see that I'm using more the expression international cooperation than development cooperation, this is by purpose. This is because I think, as it was explained before, development cooperation is transforming into international cooperation very much, and we are part of this movement. Okay, next slide. Oh, this was a little bit too quick. Sorry. Now starting with GIZ in the German development cooperation. Some key facts and figures about our organization. We are a public-owned company. You know, I mean, you had also in your transformation process in Estonia, you might have a lengthy discussion what tasks and functions should be organized in what way. What role should the private sector play? What role should the government play? In Germany, we decided long ago, but we still keep with this idea, we still keep the idea that it is good to organize practical development cooperation in the form of a public-owned company. The idea behind is that the German government thought that it would be good to combine the entrepreneurial spirit and everything which makes enterprises successful with the possibility to have full control about this company by the government, and to bring together both worlds, the government world and the private world, in one company. I mean, you have it, for example, if we have a look on what has proven to be successful in development cooperation, for example, in the water sector. You know, after a lengthy debate and discussion and pilots and tests in how far the private sector could be much more and better involved in the provision of water services, clean water. We are at the moment, and there had been a lot of tests and experiences worldwide. We are at the moment, I have the feeling, in the stage that we acknowledge that management of water resources, especially in urban areas, it is good to have a public-owned company responsible, a communal-based public-owned company being responsible for the management of water. This is, for example, one of the experiences. So we still, in Germany, we believe that even also the field of development cooperation, it's good to have a public-owned company there. So we are a non-profit company. Our mandate is we are supporting mainly the German government, in the field of international cooperation for sustainable development. And both expressions are important. International cooperation is important and sustainable development is important. Why? Because I do not say only development cooperation. A lot of reasons you have heard already, because there are much more issues which are becoming relevant for development in international cooperation, like security issues, like the issues which were mentioned, which we would like to handle as well. It's part of our mandate. And I do not say poverty eradication or poverty reduction, but sustainable development. Because we believe in Germany, and with our organization, we believe that what we discussed very much in Rio and afterwards about sustainable development is the much more appropriate ultimate goal of our work than just poverty reduction. We have learned a lot in this discussion about Rio and plus 10, plus 20, about what means sustainable development. And we feel very much committed to this general goal where we have the feeling, and let's say maybe one word, and sustainable development, of course, according to what has been discussed in Rio and so on, is much more than ecological sustainability. It is how to bring together the ecological, the social, and the economic view on issues and find way, which is conflicting, which is not harmonious, but still to find way of negotiating these different interests in a fair and proper and transparent way. This is what comes down to it if you think about sustainable development. Okay, our turnover is approximately 2 billion euro. Not all of this money is coming from the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, the German Ministry of Cooperation and Development. It is more or less 60 to 70% coming from the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, Federal Ministry. The rest is coming from other ministries, an issue of coherence of the German international cooperation. So we do a lot for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We do a lot for the Ministry of Environment. We do something for the Ministry of Economy. We do something for the Ministry of Defense. We do something for the Ministry of Interior, you would wonder. We are always active when a certain government and department is engaged in international cooperation and would like to do more than dialogue, yeah? and let's say diplomacy. So if there is a need and a wish to implement practical projects and programs, then we are one actor, not the only one actor. Okay, so what is important is we are not a state institution, so we do not get money because we are there. We only get money for services, you know? So we are commissioned for each and every program we are doing. Nobody is paying us something because we are there. This is very important. Sometimes also our own people forget it, our own employees. So we have to struggle for resources in a way, which keeps you lively and which, you know, this is the part of private sector development and market economy. It is also a question of competition. Yeah? We have to generate good ideas, we have to prove, and to convince the budget committee of the German parliament, for example, which is the most important player in this field, that what we are doing is according to the aims and objectives of the German government. We are not an NGO, also sometimes mixed up, and we are not a financial institution or a development bank. Oh, I have to put, yeah. So, as I said already, this is our mandate to support the German government in reaching its policy objectives in international cooperation. German government, as I told you already, Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation. So not everything what we are spending or what we are using for the project is also official development aid. More than coming from the German Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, because also other ministries have money, ODA money, since several years, maybe since 3 years, I think 4 years. So part comes also from other ministries, but some of the money is also non-ODA. So money which is not statistically part of the ODA. And yes, there are also subnational states who are interested in development cooperation, and we are cooperating with them as well, our Bundesländer. So what are the policy objectives? We heard it already. I don't have to go into depth in this too much. BMZ is the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, the ministry responsible for the development cooperation of Germany. And they, of course, they have the main objectives is still poverty reduction, of course, because the business of the MDGs are not yet totally fulfilled. It's not, the mission is not accomplished. Consolidation of peace, prevention of crisis is becoming a more urgent and very important issue. Protection of natural resources and global public goods is, of course, a big issue we are talking about, and we are struggling what is the right way of providing public goods or assuring public goods. And of course, not we alone are the institution who is contributing to this. And other ministries have other objectives, which are related, but which are not the same. So when we are working for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, when we're working for other ministries, we don't do development cooperations. They are quite strict and clear on this. And for us, it was difficult because we are coming as an institution from the development cooperation to convince the other ministries that it is useful to work with us in order to achieve their objectives. But they don't do development cooperation. They do increasing of cultural and economic ties with Germany. They promote international research, like the Ministry of Education and Research and others. And we try to help them to do this. Of course, we are using in these services our 40 years of experiences in handling, dealing with developing partners. And this is very valuable for them in order to be successful on a very practical ground. So, implementing actors. What you see here is, first I have to say, this is not everything what Germany is doing in development cooperation. What you don't see is multilateral engagement of Germany. So 30%, around roughly 30% of the development budget of Germany is directly given to multilateral institutions. The UN, the World Bank, the regional development banks, and so on and so forth. So if this is the first thing, this you don't see. The rest, 70% of development cooperation money is implemented by those organizations which you see here. The KfW is doing the financial cooperation. It's a state-owned bank, so we have two state-owned institutions in the field. One is the KfW, a state-owned bank. One is GIZ, a state-owned company. KfW is responsible for financial. We are responsible for technical cooperation, and technically means everything which is not financial. So it's not reduced to technique in a more engineering understanding. It's, of course, much more political as well, but it is called technical because of the history. And we have a lot of NGOs, municipalities, public authorities, churches, foundations, private sectors, also active in the field. Here you see our friends from the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, for example. So what is the idea behind? You could say, why is Germany doing it like this? Why don't you take the money and give it only to the private sector? Why don't you give it only to the NGOs, to the civil society? Why don't you send the money only to the multilateral organizations? Why don't you just send the money in the budget of the partner countries? Yeah, why don't you send a check to the Tanzanian government in order that they are their own master of development? So the reason is, there are a lot of reasons about this. One reason is, what is reflected here is our understanding of a pluralistic setting, which is in accordance to the pluralistic, oops, oh, which is, one second, okay. Now comes the promotion part, the promotion block. No, what is important here is our understanding that our partners' societies, we do not have only to talk about partner countries or partner governments. Our partner societies are pluralistic as well. And we would like them to be pluralistic. We would like to support them in becoming pluralistic societies. So that's one reason, one good reason, why we decide that there are two big, yes, relatively big institutions handling the state-to-state, the government-to-government, official development cooperation, but there are many others with their own approach to parts of the partner society. And I feel this is a good idea. It's a good idea. I would not, even if I'm of course always fighting and for resources, I would never advise the German government to give every money to the GIZ. I would always advise them to give a certain part to the NGOs and to others, because they have their partners, civil society partners, in the partner countries, and we strongly believe, especially in those partner countries where let's say the political elite is more or less legitimate regarding the democratic processes for the legitimization. So we have the feeling it's good that other actors are involved as well. Another reason is what was discussed at the panel, that it is easier to defend and to explain about development cooperation in our own society if not only the government is involved in the business, if other groups of the society, of our own society, are practically and actively involved as well, because they are also convincing their the group of they are responsible for, or their constituencies, what is important about development cooperation. Okay, so here you see already some of the lessons we learned, because we did not change this. We had, maybe let me refer to one discussion. We had a very intensive discussion in the international, which was led by the DAC, by the Development Committee of the OECD, with the famous conferences on Accra, Paris, and the end Busan. And at that time, it was very heavily debated if such a model as we have it in Germany is outdated. Yeah? And there was this discussion of the ownership of our partners is deteriorated by what we are doing. So we need more ownership, more responsibility in the countries. And there was a strong issue of just transferring, in a conditioned or non-conditioned way, just transferring development budget directly into the budget of our partner countries. And we in Germany, we had been very critical about this approach. Yes, Germany experienced also a little bit with budget aid, and Europe has still a lot of budget aid, but in Germany, we are very critical about this. We don't believe that this is the answer for the future, that you just transfer the money. This is not our understanding of development cooperation. Even if in certain cases, Germany is also doing development cooperation, budget transfer, budget aid. Okay, so how do we work as GIZ? We have around 16,000 people all over the world. Most of them are national employees of GIZ. We have only around 2,000 people sent to the field as so-called experts. The rest is national. We are still working in 130 countries. This is, be aware, when we talked about as you did, don't we have, in the context of European cooperation, don't we have to reduce the partner countries? Yes, Germany reduced the partner countries to more or less 50. We have 3 different categories. But we as GIZ, as we do a lot, not only for the Ministry of Economic Cooperation, but for others, and for the World Bank, and for the European Commission, and for the private sector, these are all our clients. We are still working in 130 countries, and we believe this is a good idea. We have activities in all country categories. We newly started to work in EU member states. You would wonder, but we have the mandate now from the German government that we, for example, we support different reforms in Greece, for example, in the field of decentralization, local autonomy, in the field of the health sector, reform of the health sector, in the field of renewable energy. So which is bloody complicated if it comes to the financial model, I have to tell you. But by the way, we believe that it would be a good idea for the European Commission to develop own instruments in order that one member state can support the other member state. You know, as Estonia, that, for example, Europe has a lot of good instruments like the twinning, like the TASIS, and so on, for the accession countries to the European Commission. We don't have an instrument for cooperation inside of Europe. Why? Because everybody was signing the contract that the acquis communautaire is in all parts implemented in the same way, which is of course not true, but it is part of the European identity. So we are lacking instruments for cooperation inside of Europe, and we are at the moment developing those instruments together with the Commission and others. So EU accession countries, I told you already, we have done a lot in this process. Emerging economies are still very important for international cooperation, but also for, not only for international cooperation, but also for development cooperation. I think if you talk about global public goods, you cannot assure global public goods without China, without India, without Brazil and other actors. So you have also in the field of development cooperation, you have to work together with emerging economies. To have a look on my time. Developing countries, I told you. Second, the project staff in many international organizations we have as well. And we have 2 headquarters. This is not very important for you. So what is the portfolio? What are the fields we are covering? Still a huge number of different fields which are important. And at that point, I'm with Francis, that I have the feeling, yes, governance is important, and if you do not have the governance right, the rest you can forget about it. They are with you. But of course, there's also a need for technological cooperation in the field of renewables, for example. We do a lot of small-scale industry promotion. Public administration and modernization. Some issues are, of course, better done by the foundations. Other things we are doing as well in a more technical way. Vocational education and training is one of the most important, let's say, export products of Germany in the world. You can't imagine there's no country which is not going to our diplomats, to the embassies, and asking for support in the field of vocational training, for example, because there is a model in Germany which is interesting for the rest of the world. Innovation systems, agriculture, infrastructure, public-private partnerships is a big issue. Germany has developed an own facility for public-private partnerships where we try to join forces with the public sector, with the private sector, involving directly private enterprises in development cooperation, and many more. Who are the clients and contracting modalities? I told you already a little bit about this. These are our clients. Here you see, which might be interesting for you, also private companies. And not only in the field of public-private cooperation. I give you an example. One company which might be known by you is Lidl, as one of the big, stores in Germany. So they are very much under pressure by the NGOs in Germany regarding the social and the ecological standards of their value chains, of their supporting and contracted companies all over the world. So we have, for example, the Lidl commissioned GIZ in helping them to guarantee social and ecological standards in their value chain, which is a very important issue. That's my strong belief, without the private sector, we will never be successful. You can spend as much as you want in the government and the state money without the private sector, without convincing them, and it is a complex system, without the pressure of the NGOs, the private sector would not move in this direction. So, but if they are moving, we are good partners in order to bring them where we want them to have. Yeah, this is maybe too detailed. Many types of services, technical assistance for complex reform processes is one of our key. Human capacity development, trainings, networks, e-learning, study tours are important. When I'm talking about GIZ and development cooperation, I'm of course convinced that there had been I would say, there's one thing which is misleading in the debate since the beginning, and Mr. Beier was mentioning this point. When you have a look in the history of development cooperation, with inventing the Bretton Woods institutions and so on, you see that development cooperation is very often misunderstood or set, or let's say identified with transfer of money. And I strongly believe that money is not the key factor, not the key limiting factor for development. I'm with Francis saying without money, it will also be difficult, but I'm totally with Mr. Beier saying, if there is not a change in minds and in capacities of people to handle what they got from money, then it is a failure. And we are reducing also in the international debates, development cooperation very often to transfer of funds, transfer of money, aid money, to give capital where capital is lacking. And I strongly believe that not the lack of capital is the main reason when development is not happening in the way we would like to see it. So we have partnerships, this is another alliances, here you see just the way we are working, stakeholder dialogues, impact monitoring. We know a little bit about what is happening, so we have a little bit of monitoring. Management of funds and infrastructure placement of experts. So these are the means of cooperation we have, and I'm also with Mr. Beier that, let's say, as the same which I said to money is true to knowledge. Of course, it is not enough that an expert with a certain knowledge is going to a country, delivering its expertise, and then development is functioning in the way we would like to have it. This is also much too simple. So where I disagree with Mr. Beier was that I think still experts are an important element of development cooperation. Why? Because what we are experiencing is that our role is only partly to bring in knowledge which is not there. Our role is much more to facilitate certain processes, to organize cooperation, for example. And even if you are, for example, in the West, you are a successful company. If you go into a transformation process, reform process of your own structures, you would maybe ask a third party. You would ask a strategic advisor or somebody to help you in order to come up with a certain reform plan and to support implementation. Because also you know better about your own company, you sometimes need somebody else in order to mobilize and facilitate change. And this is much more our role, even now already, than just delivering knowledge, technical knowledge. So this is what in my experience, what I will show you with some new kinds of project, some project examples. I have to, how much time do I have? I mean, can you? Okay, so then I would like to give you a certain range of project examples which are relatively new for us, yeah, in order to understand what is changing, because also we do projects, also we send experts, the way of cooperation changed a lot already during the last time, in reflection of what has been described by the panel of the changing environment of development cooperation. So let's take one, the economic development in rural areas of Tajikistan. This is still classical development cooperation. We strengthen the capacity of, for example, the agricultural extension service. Yes, this is evergreen. This is, and we support them in order to deliver better their services. We do this now on a better basis of that we know how this works. The approaches which are used are, let's say, are coming from an Australian expert who, because Australia did a lot of very successful approaches in service delivery in the field of agricultural extension. We are using them, but we are using very much the old tractoristas, the old guys of the old system in Tajikistan, and bring them, strengthen their capacity, and bring them in a new context, which is more market-led in the services which are they living in. So, and this project, for example, is very successful, very successful. The output of the farmers is increased by 30% during a relatively short time of 2-3 years. So you see, there is still a need for very classical development cooperation, technical cooperation. Second example, Energizing Development, is a totally different one. It's a program, it's a global program we are running, global program, where we promise to those people who would like to invest in our project, maybe the Estonian government or somebody else, we promise that we can provide access to a modern energy system for each and everybody in the world for roughly 20 euro per person. And this is something which is really new. Why is it new? First, normally, we have the discussion, value for money, but we are in the development world, we are not able to tell the people how much does it cost to provide access to clean energy, to water, to whatever. We have so much experiences during the last 40 years that we dare to say, okay, we do it for 20 euro per capita. And this is a really good price. It's a really good price. And of course, in Peru, it's maybe more expensive than in Myanmar, but in the average, that's why it's a global program, in the average, we provide access for 20 euro per person. Why is it also new? Because it is a European program. It starts with our own experiences, and we try to convince, and this is also part of the story which was told about the European Commission, about the discussion about the coherence and division of tasks and labors. We try to convince other bilateral partners that we have piloted a lot, and we know now how to do it properly in this field. And we convinced other donors that they give their money to our program in order to scale up. One of the big problems of technical cooperation is always that we have nice pilots, and they are working, they are functioning, but they are very small scale. So the issue is always how to scale up good experiences. Normally, development policy fashion, when you are successful in one field, they are moving to the next because more fancy, more, maybe DFID has a new agenda and everybody is running to a new trend. We are lacking of continuity. So we are looking always, what has worked and how can we scale it up? Energizing Development is a very good program, which we developed together with the Dutch government. Is a Dutch-German effort, and where, in the meantime, the DFID, the Norwegian government, the Finnish government, and others are co-financing a program which is around 180 million euro, I would say. Very successful. Because of the limited time, I only mentioned to you that we are always working in, let's say, Interreg. I don't know if somebody knows from you the European structural funds. We have, for example, a European structural fund calling Interreg, which is financing cross-border activities in Europe and with other countries. And we do things like this, for example, in the Soy initiative with Bavaria, with Baden-Württemberg, and with Serbia, with other neighboring countries around. We have a global leadership. I only want to pick up one other example from those, the Alliance for Financial Inclusion, because this is also new and it shows the direction where I think development cooperation will develop to. The Alliance for Financial Inclusion is an initiative of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is, as you know, one of the biggest development actors in the meantime in the world. By the way, not part of the DAC, Busan, Accra, and so on. And I have the feeling it's also good that we have them there. I'm very much convinced that competition is a good thing. And to let new actors develop their own ideas is a good thing. What the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation did here was, and this is the only, I think this is the only policy grant they delivered to a development organization. They observed worldwide that solutions for the, what is the issue behind? The issue behind is how to provide access for marginalized people to financial services, to small credits, you know, this whole idea of to support them in small scale in entrepreneurial activities. Still, there is a lack of access to financial resources. So they observed that the modern solutions for developing countries are not developed in the north for the countries. They are developed in the south. You have, for example, a very famous example is a mobile banking in Kenya, M-Pesa. It's a very important innovation happening in the south, important for the south. Another is a branchless banking in Brazil. Very important innovation, which might be interesting for others. And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation said it would be good to support South-South cooperation in the field of financial access. And they asked GIZ, why GIZ? Because they observed that we have good experiences worldwide, that we are close to the partner due to experts which we sent there, close cooperation with the partner, good knowledge of the issue, and we have proven that we can really deliver something. So we are not only talking, we do not only conferences, at the end you can count how many people get better access to financial services and how successful are they. And then they ask us to create a learning facility, a platform, a worldwide platform, in order to exchange knowledge in the field. And at the same time, they ask us that with this activity, we have to provide access for 5 billion people more to financial services. So it's a tough contract we have with them. And they told us, you have to have an exit strategy, meaning after a certain time, you have to show us that either this institution is becoming an independent international institution, which is successful, or we leave it. So our task was to develop such a learning platform. We have this policy network, which is totally run by central bank governors. It's not not we are deciding what we do there. We have a management unit supporting central bank governors who are steering the job by themselves, and they are administering, let's say, a budget of $30 million, where learning is financed, not the introduction of new system, but the exchange and learning is financed, practical use of experiences which you have worldwide. This is, according to me, a very modern, very new form how development cooperation could look like in future in order to be more successful, new partners, new alliances, new modes of cooperation, new modes of delivery, pure ownership in the South-South organization. So what we have done here is, because I was asked what are the success factors of our work. I think the advantages of our setup is we are very flexible, very flexible. So we do not have civil servants, but we have employees, so it makes us very, 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 very flexible in order to react to different needs. We are, by the way, we agree with with our clients, on the targets we have to achieve. In the way we are achieving it, we are very, very free. It's really a success story because we are able to react on very, very different circumstances on the ground. So if we have a change of the minister, if we have a change of the institutions, we can react immediately without asking the government, are we allowed now to work with a new partner? This is totally due to our, it's up to us to decide this, and this makes us much more flexible than, for example, private consultants working on the basis of terms of reference, which have been worked out 2 years before the start of the project, if I look to Europe, and then they start to work on them, and they are normally not able to change it. But the world is changing very heavily, and so you need a flexibility. Okay, I don't want to go in everything, only I want to mention one book. What we did is, Mr. Beier told you everything already about our philosophy of interventions in social systems. We tried to, let's say, evaluate 30 years of experiences and combine this with new knowledges which we have from system theory approaches. And so we did this in the form of this handbook, and in due time this will be available, not in Estonian, I'm afraid, but in English, French, and Spanish. And you are free to read whatever you'd like, to share, to join sharing our experiences, how to manage practically projects and programs. We have identified 5 success factors where every project, every program we are running has to answer to the same questions in 5 essential fields: strategy, steering structure, cooperation, processes, and learning. These are 5 dimensions of practical program and project work, and we have for each and every factor, we have a list of questions, and every project has to answer to the questions. They don't have to do the same, they just have to answer for the questions. Okay, so I skip this a little bit. Maybe one thing which is important for you is, of course, that in Germany we are special. Why? Because we still have an own line ministry for development cooperation, which is not so much the case in most of the other countries. Most of the other countries do have development cooperation as part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we are special in Germany because of the organizational landscape, which I explained to you already. Most of other countries are doing it in a different way. So we do it a little bit differently, and we think we are. So not always it is good to do what everybody is doing. Sometimes you have to find your own way to be successful. Yeah, this I don't have to tell you because it was mentioned in the plenum before. This is why we need international cooperation. I think there are a lot of reasons why we need international cooperation and development cooperation. Yeah, now one point which was mentioned before was the issue, how much should own interests be involved in development cooperation? And I strongly believe that coming more and more to international cooperation, it's good and healthy to do what was explained in the plenum as well before, to be clear about your own interest, to define your own interest, and to negotiate this interest with your partners. It's for me a much better basis for development cooperation, for international cooperation than what we had before. I tell you, even in my practical time in the field, when we work together with our partners, and you are very close with the partners, and they have really a lot of trust, which is important, also the model of expert exchange. And after some time, they would come to you and would say, it's all very good what you are doing, but I mean, I always wonder, why are you doing it? I mean, can't you tell me the truth? I mean, what is really your interest in doing so? Yeah, and I feel it's good. Sometimes it's solidarity, sometimes solidarity is a main reason of doing so. But very often you have other interests, you have other ideas, and it is good to be transparent and to be clear and to negotiate interests. I think it's part of the overall reality. Yeah, there are some issues we are working about at the moment in Germany. I don't have the time to go into this, but for us it's really interesting. For example, I put out one where we are dealing a lot with in the moment. It's migration, international migration. It's a headache, and it's very difficult. How to define migration patterns which are sustainable, meaning how to define migration patterns where you have not a lose-lose-lose situation, but you have a win-win-win situation, a triple win as we call it. How to shape migration patterns where the migrant has an advantage and is in a fair model. The sending country and the receiving country are profiting from migration. This is what we try to find out, and we have some good experiences here. Yeah, this is what I was saying. What is modern international cooperation about? Reciprocal knowledge sharing, Mr. Meyer was mentioning it. Increase of South-South, I gave you the example of the alliance. New sources of financing we are looking for, of course. Reformed multilateral institutions, I skipped this for other people who are more involved in this one. Yeah, we mentioned the post-2015 agenda. I'm convinced that the SDGs are a good idea because they are important for our own development as well. It's reciprocal. Improved evidence of result is always a struggle. It's not an easy task. It's not because we do not want to have this clear monitoring, but because it is very difficult. Policy coherence we mentioned, and cooperation with the private sector and civil society we mentioned. Some questions, we are working on this in a way of complementarity and division of work. What do other countries want to learn from Germany? So what is really what we are bringing in? As you are mentioning in Estonia, what is what you are bringing in? And I think you have something to bring in. What does partner orientation mean in practice when a country is falling apart? This is the whole issue of fragile states is a very, very challenging issue for us. Yeah? Because some of our old models of partner orientation, working close with partners, capacity strengthening, who is your partner? With whom you want to work in a world where there is no government, there is no state, there are no institutions you can work with. How do we organize our work on the ground in conflict-affected environments? This is a very important issue for us. How to manage expectation concerning quick impacts and value for money. I still believe it is, of course it's easier if you do something which is more engineerial or which is more technical in order to prove what is the outcome. It's much more difficult in the field of governance. Yeah? So, but what does it mean? Should we spend the money now only to the sectors where we have a visible and quick result? I don't believe in it. I'm very much with Mr. Meyer and the foundations to say, I still have to invest in governance because it's essential. Even if it's difficult to prove that we are successful. Even because of this, I would propose to go on with this, because if not, we miss one of the major points of development. Yeah, what type of coordination we want to EU? You were already explaining about this. Yeah, so at the end, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Beier. Few questions, and we don't have much time for that before we switch to the next panel.
Ja.
Ivar, and then Marga.
Vielen Dank. Alles Gute. Und lassen. Ups, Vorsicht.
What you have studied from the Chinese experience, they are very successful in development aid in the last years, and how Western countries should improve the efficiency of development aid. Thank you.
Thanks, Marge Mardisena from Estonian Center of Eastern Partnership. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, and many thanks to the organizers as well. Very good and timely and interesting conference. I have one question regarding, as you had time constraints, regarding the coordination with the EU still, GIZ activities and the European Neighbourhood Policy. How much do you actually see, or how much there is this, in terms of strategic planning, how much do you actually coordinate it with the EU, let's say in terms of the new financial perspective for the coming years, in the framework of this incentive-based approach? Mm-hmm. If you could elaborate on this, thanks.
So maybe I start, I want to try to answer to your interesting questions. Maybe I start with the last one and then I come to yours regarding the cooperation with the European Commission. I mean, during the whole debate of Accra, Paris and Busan, the issue was very much how do we come to a proper joint system, yeah, where the transaction costs are not so high. You know, the observation was that, for example, in Tanzania, this was always a very important example, there are maybe 20 organizations, 20 countries are engaged in health sector, and the partners are not able to handle so many different approaches. So we were looking for alignment to what the government is doing and a better cooperation and things like this. And there we had some experiences with the idea, for example, of joint planning and joint implementation. And I tell you, my experiences, that was a mess. It became worse. So when you want, for example, we had in the field of education in one of the sub-Saharan countries, we had, I think we had 80 meetings with different groups and peoples in order to align and to plan jointly and to deliver jointly and to measure jointly and so on and so forth. At the end, I had the feeling more resources were spent for coordination than directly for the support of the partner. So this was not the solution, according to me. To do everything jointly is not the solution. What is, according to me, much better is the division of task and labor. So to better define what we are doing and what is, I think, important. What is the added value you can bring in? Yeah, why you should, as Germany, be engaged in this in this country, in this field? And there can be a lot of reasons, because you are there since a long time. You have the best experience. You have special experiences from your own country or what you bring in. And then then this is the first thing to define, and Germany reduced the partner countries very much and reduced the field of cooperation inside the partner countries very much. So Germany invested in this cooperation by these two things, that we say, okay, there's a group of partner countries where we have three, in those countries we have three sectors we are working in, and there are other group of countries where we have only one sector, and the third group of countries where we do not do anything except of regional and global programs. And as I explained before, I believe very much that regional and global programs are becoming more and more important because of the joint learning, the exchange of experiences, the South-South cooperation, the learning needs of an increasing middle class in the emerging economies. They would like to learn differently than we did it before. So, except of this, we don't do bilateral programs anymore. So this was the official answer of the German government. And what did we, as GIZ? We promoted very much, as I was explaining before, we promoted very much those approaches, those programs from us, which have proven to be successful for others. And one of our, and this was, I mean, for us, in a way, very successful, because we are getting huge funds from the European Commission, for example, in the form of delegated cooperation. So, you know, they have the possibility, at the moment, everything is done newly, and it's not yet clear how the outcome will be. But during the last years, there is a 6-pillar assessment of organizations who are interested in getting funds delegated by the European Commission. We are one of them. We went through this procedure. And now a lot of EU spend a lot of money by delegating funds to approaches which have been successful. And this is one form where they don't start again their own program and looking for new people, new organizations, but they use own European institutions, not only European institutions, but us as well in doing so. The same we did with other bilateral partners. And as I explained to you, Energizing Development is one example. We have a raising interest of co-financing partners. The most important, beyond is the European Commission, is DFID increasingly, is before the change of the government in Australia, it was AusAid. Now it's becoming more difficult because they reduced the amount of money they are spending for development cooperation drastically in Australia. We have the Swiss government, the Dutch government, the Norwegian government. So we have a lot of strong partners, and we join the implementation, and they just deliver their funds. For us, it's good because we can do more, but it is also complicated because we have to report, of course, according to their standards to each and everybody. And now we will see what will be the future of. I'm sure that we need a proper coordination, but I'm not so much in favor of everybody is doing the same but jointly. Yeah, this would be the rough answer. Now coming to your question, the last first, the Chinese. I could talk another hour about the Chinese, as we are very heavily. You know that Germany, the last Minister for Development and Cooperation, who was from the Liberal Party, he stopped the classical development cooperation with China, Germany-China. We had been part of a successful transformation, I would say, that now sectors, issues, tasks which had been done by development cooperation in future times is now done by the line ministries, the German line ministries by themselves. So now we have an own cooperation of the Ministry of Justice with China, of the Ministry of Economy with China, of the Ministry of Finance with China, of the Ministry of Environment with China. And we are running roughly the same amount of, not the same, it is a little bit reduced now, but we are still very active in China. Also, official development aid is not given anymore to China. So China is a very important partner for us, especially in the climate issues, in the environmental issues. And what your question was more, what did we learn for our activities in development? I think the Chinese development path is very special. It's very special. The Chinese are extremely strategic. They are long-term. They define very clearly their interests. They follow their strategies over a very long period, which is due to their political system, that they do not have to change because of elections always. So they follow their line, and they have tough means in, as Francis was explaining before, they combine more proper, let's say, investment with their interests and with the interest of the partners. And I think what we have to think about is how can we offer our partners a more complex and comprehensive product, which involves also more direct investment in the economies. This is a very important point. Francis made it before. And I think we have to think about how this could look like while we are totally different in our political system. We do not have big state companies who are able to invest there, not respecting the, let's say, the economy and the return on invest on a short term, you know. We are shaping contexts and frame conditions in order to attract private capital to invest in the markets of our partners, but they do it on the, they calculate quite toughly, and they have to have another return on investment. So we are not able to offer the same to our development partners like China is offering, because we have a different system. Yeah. So But what we should do is to work together with China in order to find out, can we jointly do something which is maybe less disturbing, less negative, because be frank, yes, some countries are profiting a lot of the investment of Chinese. The Chinese got a lot out of this because, in respect of their resources which they need. And not everything what they are doing is very sustainable in the countries. So I think we know a little bit better about how to sustain and how to shape the cooperation more sustainable, while the Chinese have different instruments and means. And I think it would be worthwhile, and we try to do this, and the Swiss are trying to do it, to bring the Chinese more in the context of how does an internationalization strategy looks like, which is more sustainable. This would be one issue our German Minister of Economic Cooperation and Development would like to discuss, the new one, would like to discuss with the Chinese. Last question regarding our funds. You know that, of course we have the 0.7 goals. Every country has it. 0.7 of the gross national the GDP, gross national development product, and Germany is still far from this 0.7. We are at the moment 0.35 or 0.37. And okay, now it's becoming very political, how I would react to this. For me, it's difficult to comment on this political issue because I'm not a politician. I'm not responsible for the German government. My impression is, yes, it is important to have a lot of means, but it is more important to spend it in a reasonable way and an effective and very efficient way. And in some areas, not contradicting what you said, Francis, but in some areas, I have the feeling that first you need capacity development of the partners, that they will be able to absorb a certain amount of money before you could add additional money. We have situations of over-aidedness, which a lot of negative aspects as well regarding the ownership of our partner countries and so on. So I believe very much that you have to be careful. You can also spend too much money. I'm always saying you can't buy development and you can't enforce development. It has to come, as Mr. Meyer said in the beginning, it has to come from the country itself. We can be partners based on our own interest, on the interest of the others, but there is a limit. There's a certain limit regarding external aid and the effects you can achieve with external aid, and especially with money. Is my impression. And money is, at the moment, is abundant. You have a lot of money, and if we fill now this was another issue, I did not mention it, the Green Development Fund with a lot of money. This will be an interesting issue. 100 billion of euros are spent then for climate change issues. We will see how do we absorb this, how we spend it in a reasonable and responsible way. I think most questions I have answered are...
Okay,
sorry for being too long.
Well, we started the panel a little bit long, but big round of applause then.
Thank you.